Yeah, and you mentioned this a minute ago, but now we're looking at a new crisis with the coronavirus. And
Yeah.
you mentioned how there's some college students in Nashville that are in need of places to stay, and who knows what needs are going to come out in the next couple of weeks or even months. I mean, we're seeing at the time of this recording, this is Thursday, and Wednesday, what was it, March 11th was the day of kind of day of dread where all the news came out with all the
Yeah.
cancellations and Tom
The
Hanks
day of
getting coronavirus.
cancellations. Yeah.
They cancel culture's heightened moment. But I mean, there's so many things that have been going on just in the past week, and who knows what this is going to look like a week from now or a month from now. I mean, has your church had any kind of preliminary talks about how to handle this, or do you have any personal thoughts on how churches can or should
Hmm.
handle this crisis that's starting?
We've had conversations as a staff, and it's been interesting the shift because none of us are inclined towards panic. Some of that personality wise, some of that belief in God's sovereignty. So then for somebody like me who tends to just shrug stuff off like that, just I
Right.
don't have a personality that gets worried much. It's hard for me to respond graciously to panic. However, we
Same.
are responsible. However, as church leadership, we're responsible for the well-being of our people as much as it's up to us. So, what steps can we take to be conscientious of those who are afraid, and to take reasonable measures to to limit things, to limit the spread of this? And it's been helpful to hear reasonable medical heads talk about it, where they're like, most of you who are reading this are not at risk for it, but you are at risk of being a carrier who then could get it to somebody who's at risk. So the reason we recommend things like quarantines, or what are they calling it?
Social distancing.
Social distancing. That just sounds like a conscious uncoupling and some other made up phrase, but here we are. Is because that will limit the spread to the
Right.
vulnerable. So our medical facilities don't get overwhelmed. All of that makes total sense to me. And that, I think that sounds like treating others the way you would like to be treated. Same with washing your hands, same with whatever. Like, just that all makes sense. So we've talked about what does it look like if we get to a place where we need to cancel large gatherings? How do we then shepherd the people in a worship context? Is it groups getting together in each other's homes and we video stream it out, things like that? So, the band and the pastor are at the church streaming and everybody else is in homes, whatever. So we're figuring some of those things out. We've had some great resources passed on to us. From even like we read an article that one of our pastors found from persecuted church in China, who said when our churches get shut down, we do it this way. And this is not persecution, but the net effect if we have to split up and go into homes is similar. So I think for me as a leader and for our church leaders, the biggest thing has been figuring out what is a reasonable way to care for people and not just do what we think makes the most sense. So there's an element of acquiescing, even if we think it's kind of silly, some of it. But there's also this is a great unknown. We don't know. Like, I've never lived through a pandemic of any kind, and neither has anybody else my age. And so what does it mean to live through a pandemic? Is how, I have scenes of like the Black Death in my mind and like bodies stacked in the streets, but I'm like, I think it's just I don't think it's that at all. But the net effect on the economy and on schools, like what happens if they close schools for the rest of the semester?
Yeah.
Like my kids, I have a 14 and 11-year-old. I'm dreading that. I don't want my
Yeah.
kids home for 3 more months and then summer break. That sounds awful for all of us. So there's a lot of those kinds of things that we have not gotten our heads around to figure out. I don't think anybody has. How do you
Yeah.
navigate life when businesses and schools and whatever else are potentially closed and so forth? It is one of those times, and it can sound fatalistic, but it's profoundly true, where you say, thank God he's sovereign, because I don't understand any of this.
Yeah, and I've remarked the other day, I'm very thankful that I'm not in any position to make any sort of decisions on any of this, because I feel like, anybody who's in a leadership, whether that's a commissioner of a professional sports league or any sort of group that has to deal with cancellations or suspensions, they're going to get flack from people, and it's a pressure packed situation, and it's just like there's no context really for this. Like you said, we haven't really
Right.
lived through this, so there's no precedent to refer to. I mean, we can look at maybe Ebola and Zika as similarities, but there was nowhere near this global impact that this has had to where things are being shut down, and so there's just no way to really know. And there's people that I know that are studying abroad that can't get back home, and so there's families that are worried, and it's just like I think part of the panic is just exacerbated where it's like, well, now my kid is over abroad and now they're not getting home. And then, for instance, my wife's uncle is stationed in Germany with the Air Force, and he may not be able to get back to America for his daughter's high school graduation in June. And
Yeah.
it's just crazy to think about that we're here in middle of March, and this might be having ramifications into the summer. And so one of those things where I think, yeah, as Christians, much like we would with any other tragedy or major event, it's kind of like just be prepared to help in whatever way you can,
Yeah.
whatever that means. The Kentucky governor here in Kentucky this past week urged churches, I guess not urged, recommended churches to not meet on Sunday. And so as far like the time of this recording, our church said that they're planning to still meet as normal,
Right.
but you never know. I mean, what's crazy is here in Kentucky and then Indiana, where I'm from too, like this is obviously not as important, but a high school basketball tournament's going on, and that's a big
Yeah.
deal to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And there's a chance that might either get suspended or canceled altogether. And it's just crazy to think about the ripple effect that this has on like the things that we usually go to get away from this kind of stuff, entertainment, sports, that is now being affected. And so it's just like I tweeted earlier today. I said this feels like we're just living in the plot of a science fiction novel or movie or something.
Yeah.
It's just it's crazy. There's just no precedent for
It's
it. So yeah.
I think people need to be very conscientious to separate this from like the World War Z reality though. Like this is a massive life altering thing because of its scope, but it's not the end of the world.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, this is when it's good to be a student of history. Every pandemic that has ever happened has not ended the world, and some of them have been far worse than this in terms of mortality.
Right.
This is going to have I mean, it's profoundly inconvenient, but we'll make it. And yeah, we don't
Yeah.
know if this is going to last 4 weeks or 4 months or like what is going to happen here. There's just a lot that's unknown, but it's if we just this might be a thing that we need to get us out of our own like you've upended my life. I disapprove of this. I was wrestling with that yesterday because we get done with our men's Bible study in the evening, and I'm working on some stuff to try to figure out housing for displaced college students. And then I get the news that the NBA has suspended their season. And then my first thought is, oh, crap, the baseball season is going to do the same thing. And I was so excited about that starting. And then I had to hit pause and be like, do those matter? Do they matter at all? Like,
Right.
not as compared to so many other things. So I'm offended that my pleasure and convenience has been interrupted.
Right.
So maybe this is something that will be really beneficial for a selfish America to realize that we can do some things for our neighbors. We can there are going to be those who are really financially impacted because some of us can work from home because the internet. Others, if they don't go to work, they don't get paid. So they need help. There's going to be opportunities in this for us to really serve people and to get out of our own self-centeredness. And I think that could be a significant positive outcome of all of this.